Welcome to Deep Thought, a weaponized culture. Now, there's a little something I'm not going to share with y'all, but I'm going to pay attention to something with this, and I'm going to see what happens with this video. Or podcast, rather, since y'all not seeing my face. But a weaponized culture. Now, I talked about the importance of culture. Now, what's a weaponized culture? A weaponized culture is an imperialistic culture. It's a culture that a group of people will use to dominate another group of people. Like Christianity, or the culture around Christianity, was used as a weaponized culture against Africa and against Africans by the Europeans, and also in not so much in the American South, but believe it or not, most slaves weren't converted to Christianity. The conversion of Christianity with blacks in America actually came after the Civil War, most of it. But that's still a weaponized culture. That's still a weaponized culture to go any place and impose your values on another group, impose them. Like the soldiers of that culture, not necessarily actual soldiers with guns, but missionaries or Peace Corps workers. When you come in and when you say, well, the way you doing things is wrong. This is how we do it in my culture. And use a variety, like really psychological warfare, because you can't, believe it or not, it's hard to impose a culture with a gun, because then people just pretend until they get an opportunity to slit your throat. But when you come in and you try to say this is superior, and you try to make them question, like when missionaries go into a culture that worships deity in a different way and say, hey, this is wrong, this is evil, or it's a way, or we're going to take your kids away from you and educate them in our cultural ways. And then when they grow up, they following us more so than they following this. And this plays out in history. If someone gets offended by what I'm saying, it's in the history books. And it's always what happens. You go in and you say, well, this is a better way of doing it. You even have it now. I had a commenter on a video I did recently, and they said they made a comment about something I said, and I said, hey, this is my cultural perspective. And the person apologized, but still, you'll have people who will look at something when they try to correct you according to how they see it, but that's their cultural thing. Or they'll feel like my culture is better than yours, but when it's just different. And then when you weaponize it, when you use the coercion, it could be psychological, where you say, hey, I need to talk to you about my God or my way of doing things. It could be my economic thing. It could be my philosophy. And it's psychological, where when you get people who try to argue with you because they're really arguing for their culture, and say this is the way you should do it. Or even when you get arguments between people, maybe on the more relationship side, it could be a cultural thing how different groups approach relationships. And I'm going to get into that culture and relationships thing tomorrow. But it's a significant thing. Now, it could be psychological, it could be money-wise. Say a group gets control of another area, they colonize it. They might conquer it, however way they do it. Now, I said people don't change for a gun, but what if, for example, you're there long enough to establish businesses? The colonizers are there long enough to establish businesses and stuff to eat and everything. And then all of a sudden, it's like you have an economic instead of the people still want jobs, but you'll say, hey, if you want to work on this job, you have to adhere to this culture. For example, back in the 70s, we had the Black is Beautiful movement. And there was a time where blacks were they were throwing away those straightening combs and those processed, and they were saying, hey, we black, beautiful, got the big bushes. But then part of the counter strike to that, the counterpart of the counter revolution was, okay, yeah, we got these jobs for you, but you're gonna have to cut that bush. You're gonna have to adhere to a certain dress code. You can't wear that dashiki in here. Now, to some extent, that's okay, but then when you start talking about hair, that's a cultural thing. In fact, that's something still to this day, which I find very interesting, that you've had states that have had to pass civil rights bills for blacks to wear their hair natural. Not in locks or something, or even with some of the police forces. That's a cultural thing. And that's forced off by the economic thing. It says if you want to work at this place, you want to make money, you have to adhere to our cultural thing. Like anything, when you force it. Now, yeah, there's a thing about culture I could bring up. It's deep. I don't bring that up unless I know exactly who I'm talking to, because there's really a deep thing with it on how culture really gets created. I ain't gonna get into that, but it's a weaponized. Now, if you use your culture, now somebody could use their culture as a weapon. They can use it as a weapon. Now where they combine the economics, the psychological, maybe the gun, whatever they can, even sex, and say, hey, this is what you need to be doing. This is how we're going to control you. You're going to practice our culture. We're going to use it as a weapon, like propaganda. That's like a gun. Propaganda is a gun. The media is a gun for projecting the culture. Like when say you have one group that wants to go into another area, but they'll start like sharing books about, hey, look at this great culture, look at what we're doing, or TV shows or something, and they show it. But the thing isn't just to share it as part of a cultural exchange, but it's to say, hey, this way is better. This way of life is better. Our culture is better. So you projecting that, and if that's all you see. I mean, and you kind of have that in this country when you only see like a small portion of how people are living, or you only see certain ideas being promoted. That's weaponized right there. And it's like, it's really, honestly, it's probably the most effective way of doing something. Because if you look at any type of conquest, like I said, with the guns, they have a place, but people resist guns. You point a gun at somebody, say do something, they'll do it not to be killed, but they haven't changed their mindset. But if you project the culture as subtle, and you say you project it as better than whatever the group is practicing, and say, hey, you can get money, you can even get love. And I'm gonna talk more about culture and relationships in my next one. It works out. And then instead of forcing a person to do something, to adhere to something, they do it of their own free will, or at least they think it's their own free will. But if you constantly say, you constantly projecting an image of a certain thing, or you constantly saying, hey, if you want to work, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to dress like, you affect it. Now, it's deep. Now, some people want to pick up on some of the stuff I was actually saying out there. And there might be one or two people pick up on the whole series on why I'm even bothering to do it. But, as always, it's always about getting y'all to think. That's the main thing. So anyway, that's all we have for now. I'll talk to you later. As always, think on this. Peace.